Tonight, it's the end of Hawkman Wanted, the lamest crossover that you've never read. It's also the end of the Black Diamond probability, which would take the title if it could even be considered a crossover. And we also have the end of the Green Lantern event, Rise of the Third Army, which literally could not even wait to the last page to start up the next big event. Thanks, DC. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 74 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and we have 15 comics. Now that's not a lot, but 2 of them are annuals. One of those annuals is the end of a major event, Rise of the Third Army, and I seemingly have gone over on time for pretty much every one of the comics I talked about. So while I won't know how long this episode is until I'm done editing it, my gut tells me it's really long. So if you want a list of all the comics that are going to be in this episode, feel free to look at the description of however it is you're listening to this. But in the meantime, I'm just going to jump right into things if it's all the same to you. Okay, great, cool. Let's go to Green Lantern. Red Lanterns number 16, written by Peter Milligan, art by Guinaldo. This is the final part of the Rise of the Third Army for this particular book. And last issue we left off with the Manhunters being awoken by Atrocitus and them seemingly killing him. But it turns out it was just kind of like a light flesh wound sort of thing. So he's battling against the Manhunters and he's like, yep, they're going to try to kill me, but I need to use them in order to fight the Third Army, so gotta figure out what I'm supposed to do. And as he looks through the crowd, he sees the Alpha Manhunter giving commands. And he's like, okay, if I go and get him, it will cause the rest of them to not know what to do because they need to be given orders. So he immediately just leaps through the crowd, grabs the Alpha Manhunter and starts tearing it to shreds. And as all the other Manhunters stand around, he's like, hey, I've killed your leader and now I am your leader. So listen to me. And then we cut back to Earth, where Rancor and Bleez are attacking Rancor's, he calls him Rage Maker. It's Baxter, the guy who killed his grandfather. And he's about to kill him, and Bleez is like, well, hold on. You can make him suffer more if you don't kill him. And Bleez cuts open his abdomen and spits her, like, I don't know, napalm blood. Somehow her saliva is also napalm blood inside the wound. And he's like, see, we're just going to make him boil in agony for a few years. It's not enough to kill him, but he'll be in intense pain for the rest of his life. And Rancor's like, this isn't about me enjoying stuff. This is about justice. This is about vengeance. What does the matter with you, please? I heard you talking to the Star Sapphires back like 3 issues ago. I know that you're not all that you crack up to be. And so he takes a construct knife and just throws it into Baxter's heart. And then the construct knife transforms into a construct of his grandfather, chewing him out for being such a disappointment, for just killing the guy outright. And Rancor's like, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to be dead, Grandpa. So cutting back to Atrocitus, he's killed a whole bunch of small little critters on Ryut in order to cause blood magic that allows him to control the Manhunters via just having like a blood of X on their foreheads. And so he uses his weird telepathy powers and it's like, all right, all of you, you're going to Oa and you're going to attack them. It's all part of my plan, my calm, cool, collected plan. And then the Alpha one steps up and he's just like, calm, cool, and collective. Forgive me, Master, but that doesn't sound like rage. And he's like, shut up. I know it's not. I hate that I'm doing this, but I gotta do it in order to save the universe. And he collapses briefly, and his ring's like, hey, you still don't have a lot of like power. The battery's still messed up. And he's like, what is going on that the battery's still messed up? I told him to fix that. And so then we cut back to Yzmal, where I forget his name, Ratchet, I believe it is. Yes. Ratchet is currently digging down into the planet because he's like, I had this theory about like global anemia a few issues ago, but that was stupid. In actuality, I'm betting that the planet is sucking up the energy of the lantern. So he digs down inside. He comes across a cave, and inside are the inversions back from, I think, the Zero issue that we saw last issue as well. And they're like, hi, I'm one of the inversions. We were friends with Atrocitus, and then he betrayed us. And Ratchet's like, yes, I am well aware. So, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, well, we've got a plan, and we're going to come back, and we're going to kill him. But we're not dealing with that yet. So then we cut back to Earth. The Construct attacks Rancor, and Bleeze pulls him out of it as it disintegrates. And she's like, hey, I wasn't your real grandfather. That was your guilty conscience. You turned it into a construct. And he's just like, guilty? I'm not guilty. I literally killed that guy. He's like, yeah, well, maybe the Red Lantern side of you thinks that you should have made him suffer. Like, you've got a battling Red Lantern side and a human side, and you're not quite either. Anyway, what you do have is the ability to make constructs, and I could really, really go for that. And she, like, sidles up next to him and then tries to take a few drops of his blood, which she believes will give her the ability to make constructs. And when he's like, whoa, hold on, you're not getting my constructs, lady. She's like, oh, really? Don't you like how sexy I look? And he, like, freezes for a second as she, like, goes after him. And he just runs away. He's just like, no, I have to protect my virginity. So he flies away. And Bleeze is like, well, we could have been lovers, possibly even more. But now you've made an enemy for life. So then we cut to Oa. The Manhunters are arriving, and they're like, oh, hey, Manhunters, we haven't seen them in a while. Maybe they could help us beat the Green Lanterns in this event. And then, oopsie, they're here to destroy. So Oa starts firing off a bunch of guns. But it turns out that's only like most of the Manhunters. A smaller subsection has gone with Atrocitus to Malthus, which is the homeworld of the Guardians. And they're deep inside the planet. And they're looking for something. And as they come across it, it's this big blue glowing box of light. And all of a sudden a face pops out of it. And it's like, oh, hey, this thing's alive. But then a bunch of faces pop out of it. And it's like, no, no, no. These are just faces from the past. These are old, like, things that were imprisoned in here. This is a dead planet. But then the face of Krona shows up. And it's like, hey, Atrocitus, it's me, Krona. I'm the one who programmed the Manhunters. And Atrocitus is like, say what? And that's where we leave off. Yes, this is technically a tie-in to the Third Army, but, like, unlike the previous, I think the issue before last and the issue before that, those issues felt really strongly tied in. This feels more like, okay, we played the game, we did what we needed to do, and we got the Manhunters to Oa as is necessary for the plot to progress, but now we're just going to do our own thing. It's not bad, but to label it as a tie-in, especially the final tie-in to Rise of the Third Army, it's a little weak. It's not quite what I would say it should be. But it is a good story just in general. It seems mostly, though, like it's going to be set up for what the Red Lanterns are doing moving forward. We got the inversions going on. We got Bleeze versus Rancor. We got Rancor's own personal crap. We're just setting up that stuff, and honestly, the events really don't matter that much to this. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7. It's just a nice middle of the road, still pretty good. Nothing that wrong with it sort of read. So check it out if you're interested. Green Lantern Corps Annual Number 1, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Fernando Pasarin. This is the finale to Rise of the Third Army, and last issue we left off with Guy Gardner getting broken out of jail and brought to the moon by Simon Baz and Bidig. So Simon's brought up to speed. Guy's brought up to speed by Simon. He shows him the message from Hal and Sinestro inside of his ring, telling him, like, hey, the Guardians are behind all this. And then Guy just does a run-through for anybody who skipped the entirety of the event. He's like, yep, the Guardians, one by one, got rid of all the Earth Lanterns via very convenient means, and my thing was the last one. So, yep, those guys are doing something crazy. Ring, how long is it going to take them to overtake the universe? And Bidig's Ring, like, about 27 days. And it's like, okay, well, we need to pick up the pace. So then all of a sudden a call comes through from the Guardians on all the Green Lantern rings, basically saying, hey guys, you may have heard about this Third Army stuff. It can possess your body. Luckily, we, the Guardians, found a vaccine to it. And you need to come up and get your vaccines, or else you're going to get possessed. So everyone come back to Oa right away. A little bit on the nose for me, but regardless. So at that point, Guy's like, yeah, all right, well, I'm not getting vaccinated. So then he comes up with his own plan here, and he's like, here's the thing. We got to take down the Guardians. We got to figure out what's up. Simon, you can literally do anything. You literally brought a guy out of a coma in your own story. You are able to do whatever you want as a Green Lantern. Don't forget that. Badig, go inside the Black Lantern book that you got your hands on. Go inside of it and find Hal. That seems to be really important. Meanwhile, give me a construct that's going to let me fly back to Oa so I can get my own ring. And so he makes a cool-ass cyborg suit and flies away. So Simon and Badig open up the pages to the Black Lantern book, and they're like, hey, are you sure this is a good idea? We might not be able to ever get out. And Simon's like, yeah, whatever. So they go inside the book, and we see this image of what I believe to be the first lantern swallowing them, which might be a bit of a future thing. But regardless, they get inside, and Black Hand's inside waiting for him. Be like, hi, welcome to the Chamber of Shadows. May I take your order? So then we go to John Stewart and Fatality, who are being blasted around the asteroid field that is Mogo, and it is very quickly reassembling itself into its center core. And they're like, yeah, we did it! We let Mogo survive! And then the Guardians see this, and they're like, crap. Mogo's not supposed to be back yet. That could be an issue. All right, send all the Third Army in that area to go attack. We'll take care of them quickly. But as they're doing so, Mogo ups his gravitational field and starts pulling in Fatality and John to the point where they're not able to escape, and they get pulled into its planet's core. So that's the thing. Meanwhile, Guy arrives on Oa just as his suit runs out of energy, and he lands right next to the containment field for the rings, and he's like, oh, there's mine. I'm just going to grab that. And of course it's booby-trapped. But at that point, Kilowog shows up, and he's like, you idiot, of course it's going to be booby-trapped. And he's like, well, I could take it. It's regardless. And he asks Kilowog what's going on upstairs, and apparently all the lanterns showed up to get their vaccines. But, of course, it was all a trap, and it turns out that once you arrive, they just basically paralyze you, and you're unable to move, so that more and more of the lanterns will come and be like, oh, that looks like it's safe, and they'll still be stuck there. So it's Kilowog and a couple of other people, which... one of them is named Vash, but Vath. I don't know who they are. Anyway, they're like, yeah, so we got to go take down the Guardians. Guy, what can you even do right now without a ring? He's like, oh, I'm the guy with a plan. So anyway, the Third Army starts arriving at Mogo, and they're like, we don't see John Stewart and Fatality anywhere. Oh, well, Third Army, go attack Mogo. But then Mogo uses his asteroid field that's still all around him to start blasting away at light speed all of the Third Army using his debris. And so Mogo is fully formed again. He is a full lantern, and he is saved the lives of John and Fatality, because when he pulled them into the planet's core, it was literally just to protect them from that. And Fatality and John started celebrating, and they're like, oh, we saved Mogo. Yeah, we saved him. And Fatality's like, saved her. Remember, there was a male and a female part. So the Guardians start doing their villainous monologue over top of the lanterns, just like, hey, we know you're upset with us, we get it, but believe us, this is all for the best. We absolutely had to do this. And at that point, Guy shows up and punches the Guardians in the face. And it's just like, yeah, you tried to destroy me, but I'm back and I'm better than ever. And it turns out they're using Krona's glove or something like that in order to give Guy the ability to tap directly into the willpower of the central battery. I don't know. Sounds like they're referencing old stuff. I don't know. But they do end up blasting it away, and they end up knocking off his suit. And it's just like, see, without a Green Lantern ring, you're nothing, Guy. And Guy's like, nah, I'm me. And they're like, yeah, that's true, like, technically. So they start going in about to destroy him. It's just like, see, what was all this for? He's like, oh, I was just the distraction. And it turns out that the other Green Lanterns that were there are severing the transmission lock on the rings. They're getting rid of the inoculation grid, and they're sending out their own message to all the lanterns that haven't showed up yet, basically saying, hey, the Guardians are betraying us, you got to get back here and kick their asses. So at that point, the Third Army show up via wormhole, and it's just all-out battle time. They're about to go after Guy, who is at this point powerless, before Kyle and the rest of the new Guardians come swooping in to save the day. Kyle is now a White Lantern, and they also start fighting 100%. Guy gets his ring back, because of course he does, starts fighting, and at that point the Manhunters from the Red Lantern story show up and also start joining the fight, and the Guardians are like, okay, this might actually be a little bit too much, what with the White Lanterns and the Manhunters and all. I'm not entirely sure how we're supposed to deal with this, so we need to get some more power from the First Lantern. And the First Lantern is just sitting there like, don't you do it. I'm warning you, don't you take more power. And they're like, no, your power belongs to us. So they start draining it of more power to get a little bit of a supercharge. But then the First Lantern's like, you're taking too much. You're lowering the prison walls. I'm going to get out. And they're like, no, you aren't. And he's like, yes, I am. And all of a sudden, he breaks apart the prison walls. He screams, Volthoom will be free. And then we just get a page of your core, your hunters, your army, everything you've ever created, Guardians, will be no more, as the page literally disintegrates into white nothingness. So now we're starting up the next event, Wrath of the First Lantern, because we literally cannot breathe for a second. So I like it. I like it as its own independent story, but it is so much of a non-ending. Like, this is the end of Rise of the Third Army, and maybe we disintegrated the whole army. I doubt it, but maybe we did. But we're just rolling right into the First Lantern thing without so much as time to catch our breath, and I feel like there should have at least been a little bit of a conclusion on this. Like, have them fully wipe out the Third Army, and then go after the Guardians, and then the Guardians pull this. That would work. It would give us the conclusion of the Third Army. But now, this was like a non-ending. It's just rolling right into the next. It's not bad. I think that the storytelling in this was good, but the ending just leaves so much to be desired. So, in that regard, I'm going to give this one a 7. Like I said, I think it's good. And to fault the entire issue for the fact that it just happened to be 2 events, one right after another, it's not that big of a deal, but it is enough to knock it down. This probably would have been like an 8 if it had an ending to the Third Army stuff, instead of just letting it free flow out of there. So 7 for this, and we'll see what happens in Wrath of the First Lantern. Superman number 16, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Kenneth Rocafort, the next part of Hell on Earth. So, last issue was, I think, Superboy. Some stuff happened. Doesn't matter. Anyway, we cut into this, and we get some backstory on Hell, back when he was on his planet. And he's like, yep, I was an astronaut. We hadn't gone to space in like centuries, but Jor-El is sending me up, and he super trusts me to be a good pilot. And one day, right before the launch, I'm going in and I'm just checking some last minute stuff. He comes up and he's like, hey, Hell, you gotta go to bed, man. You got a long day tomorrow and you gotta be up to 100% of your senses. And he's like, oh, yeah, you are my mentor and the man I look up to more than anything else. And Jor-El's like, stop it, you're fine. So they walk out, and it turns out that like the whole planet has turned out to celebrate Hell's journey to wherever in space, because he's given them hope of a brighter future. So Jor-El and Hell are walking down the hallway, and Jor-El's wife Laura shows up and she's like, Hell, what a wonderful time to see you. We wanted to give you a gift before you left. And she gifts him the crest of the House of El, aka the Big S. And it's just like, oh, I promise you I will not fail you. By my word and my actions, Krypton will not die. And turns out he's recounting the story to Supergirl. And she's like, oh my god, this is incredible. But like, I would have been alive at that point, or at least I would be alive soon afterwards. Why didn't I hear about any of this, Hell? And he's like, you've memory loss or something because of space or whatever, doesn't matter. So they end up kissing, and Kara's like, oh, I believe in you, Hell. I believe in our ability to get Krypton back. And then they hear some loud booming noises, and Hell's like, yep, Justice League are still trying to break in. That's still going on. Remember when Flash attacked you in your last issue, Supergirl? And she's like, yes, I do. I don't know why they hate us so much. And he's like, it could be anything. Anyway, we got to make sure they don't get to us before we're ready to go. So then cut over to Superman and Justice League and Superboy, who are all fighting against some crazy-ass creatures that Superman saved from whatever planet because he likes having a zoo. And Cyborg's like, yeah, sorry I keep teleporting us into these super dangerous rooms that you have, Superman, but Hell keeps on redirecting my boom tubes. And Superboy's pissed off. He's like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. So he uses his telekinetic ability to just kill all the monsters instantly. And they're like, oh, you could have done that at any time, Superboy? And he's like, I guess. So then Cyborg steps up and he's like, hey, I'm ready for the next jump. Anyone else want to go? And Batman's like, no, we're not doing that again, Cyborg. You literally have failed 3 times in a row. And Superboy steps up to Batman and be like, oh, I'm sorry, do you have a plan that doesn't involve me almost dying? And he's like, you're fine. And yes, I do. So at this point, Hell launches into some long-ass monologue about, like, I'm so happy I get to see the day Krypton can come back, and all it takes is this planet's sacrifice. And Kara's like, sacrificing this planet, what do you mean? I thought you said that it was just, like, solar radiation that we were harvesting, the stuff they didn't need. And he's like, right, that was their sacrifice, the unneeded solar radiation. Anyway, so another boom happens, and Hell's like, they boom tubed again. What idiots. I will redirect them to yet another room. They will not get to us. But then it turns out that Superman and Superboy didn't join in on the boom tube that time, and he just punches through the door and body slams Hell to the ground. And he's like, this is between you and me, Hell. I'm sorry I got the League involved at all. It's like, okay, but like you kind of needed them for the whole thing. Anyway, so Supergirl steps up and it's just like, no, we're so close. Don't do it, Superman. And Superman's like, hey, I will put you down. I don't want to hurt you. But then Superboy steps up like, I'll do it. And smashes her head into the ground. And he's like, no, don't. Okay, whatever. And then instantaneously, the Justice League, Superman, and Superboy are all back outside. And they're like, crap, Hell must have teleported us again. But then Batman looks around and he's like, no, we're still in the same place. He teleported the whole fortress somewhere else. And so wherever they are now, they finally got everything they need. They start up the machine. A world-shattering kaboom happens that is heard by Dr. Veritas way under the ground, Lex Luthor way out in the desert, and the Herald up in the Himalayan mountains. And we see the giant space laser shooting up to the sky, which as it turns out, he moved the fortress like maybe a couple miles that way. Like, it's still in Antarctica, so I'm not entirely sure why it was such a big deal, but regardless, he did. And space lasers going way out into the deep space, way past other planets, and everyone's like, wow, that's incredible if it wasn't for the fact it's literally going to be the death of us all. And then we cut to the far reaches of space, which I believe this picks up after the Superboy cliffhanger, which is an alien ship comes across this giant rock-looking guy, and they're like, hey, keep an eye on it, but also try to get away from it as fast as possible. But then it activates, and apparently it's called the Oracle, and it just blasts this ship of lizard people away. And it says, the Oracle has a sacred trust it must fulfill to bear witness to the end of a world. So I guess it has something to do with the end of the world. And he's on the cover for the next Superman issue, so I guess it's a big deal. Anyway, I'm glad we're finally getting to what feels like the end of this story, you know? Because this has stretched so long, and there's only so many different ways I can hear Kara, I'm so happy that you're with me in bringing back Krypton. Yes, I'm so happy to be with you, Hell. Mwah. It's just tiring. That should have been like 2 issues, and it's somehow been 5. It's just a overly long, I think this is like part 9 of Hell on Earth. It's too long. I'm happy we're getting to the end. I appreciate that, but at this point, it's just too long. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is like a 6. It was just them going into another room where evil things were, them beating it again, them coming across Hell again. It's just the same stuff over and over. It's not particularly bad, but compared to other issues, it's just repetitive now, and I'm tired of it. Aquaman number 16, written by Geoff Johns, art by Paul Pelletier. This is the next part of Throne of Atlantis. And last issue, Justice League got taken, Cyborg wanted his lungs taken out, and they brought in the B-Team. So we pick up with Cyborg, who is currently on the operating table, and he's just like, yeah, Dad, go ahead, do it, take out my lungs. And he's like, okay, well, we need to take you offline. And he's like, oh, I don't like that. So at that point, Dr. Ivo, I believe, I could be wrong. Regardless, one of the doctors is like, hey, let me activate Red Tornado. And they're like, no, we're not doing that. And then all of a sudden on the computer, it turns out that Cyborg is trying to defragment the video file that would show who launched the missile on the ship, even while he's unconscious. So that's going on. Meanwhile, Volko and Dr. Shin are up at the watchtower. They're watching all the stuff that happened on the news. And Volko's like, hey, didn't you betray Arthur before? Aren't you kind of a dick? And Dr. Shin's like, I'm sorry, who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm Volko. I'm loyal to the king, and I will never betray him. And that's why I don't particularly like you. So at that point, Dr. Shin is like, okay, well, whatever. Where did they take the League? And it's just like, oh, well, Orm must have given them a death sentence, and he banished them to the dark waters. And we see Aquaman has broken out of his little cocoon thing that he's put all of the Justice League in, and he comes across Batman's cocoon. He's already awake, and he's trying to cut his way out, and he's like, yeah, I'll be out in a minute. And Aquaman's like, it's actually crushing pressures down here. You probably should stay in there. And he's like, I'm fine with pressure. And he's like, not this pressure. So he calls on some fish with bioluminescence to come and light up their way. But Batman's like, hey, I got sonar. I can just show you where we are. And he shows them a sonar mapping of where they have landed. And just like, yeah, we're in a mid-Atlantic trench. This is right where I brought the trench out of. Like, they were right here. And it's possible that maybe they got undug again, in which case we got some big issues. So anyway, the anglerfish show up, and then they're immediately attacked by the trench. And it's just like, crap, they're here. Okay, Batman, we got issues. We need to find Superman and Wonder Woman. Where they at? And it's like, okay, well, they probably are even deeper down in the trench where there is some sort of temple that was carved out many, many centuries ago. So we got to head down there. And basically, they're just talking about, like, okay, here's the thing. Is Orm guilty? Like, did he trigger the missile strike himself? People are questioning who did what now. But either way, we go back up on land, and the B team are fighting back the Atlanteans. We got Hawkman, Black Lightning, Vixen, Firestorm, Black Canary, Element Woman, and someone who's really tiny, who, I think that's the Atom? I don't know. Regardless, they're all just like, oh man, I can't believe we're called in. What's going on, everybody? And Hawkman's like, I'm going to kill everybody. And they're like, okay, Hawkman, you do your thing. But then they're all blown away by Orm, who just comes in being like, all right, we're going to put a bomb there, and we're going to put a bomb over there. And they, he starts screaming, saying like, oh yes, they will know the power of Atlantis. So then we see Cyborg. He's dreaming of having a normal life, and then his suit, like the actual cyborg parts of him, shows up and be like, hey, you got to wake up now. And he's like, no. So he wakes up, and he's like, all right, I can breathe underwater now? Sweet. I've also got a lock on Batman's homing beacon, which is somewhere in the mid-Atlantic. And he goes up to Mara, and he's like, hey, you want to go? And she's like, yeah, let's go. So we see Aquaman and Batman are down in this temple area. Batman starts scanning the walls of the temple to see what is written on them. And it's just like, it looks like some sort of Atlantean king with a crazy-ass scepter sinking some part of the land. And it's like, yeah, I actually came across that scepter in my own story, and I kind of lost it. I assume that Orm took it. And he's like, okay, well, there's a second image, and it's of the trench, and the person with the scepter is leading the trench. And it's like, I'm sorry, are you telling me that those creatures can be led by the scepter, and my brother has it, and those creatures are attacking us? Crap, my brother is the evil one. So they come across Superman and Wonder Woman, who are inside like some paralyzing goop stuff, and he tries to get them out, but the trench, of course, immediately come after them and attack them. And Aquaman is overrun before he can do literally anything. Batman is still stuck in his cocoon, not able to do much. But of course, at that point, Mara and Cyborg pop out through a boom tube, and they're like, hey, we're here to help. Turns out they don't like loud noises, so Cyborg sonic cannons them, breaks out Wonder Woman and Superman, who are still a little bit weak because of the paralyzing goo, and it's just like, okay, so why are we all here under the water, and who's protecting the land? And Cyborg's like, sorry, had to call in the B team. And they're like, Cyborg, you shouldn't have done that. Hawkman's up there. He's messed up, man. It's like, yeah, we know. I literally did not have a choice. But as they start deliberating, there's just like, okay, but hold on. If my brother has the scepter, and the scepter can sink the land, why would he not just already do that? And then we see the Atlanteans' point of view, where the trench have started attacking them, and they're like trying to fight them off. And it's just like, what creatures are these? What's going on? This is genuinely surprising to me. And then back in the lab, the video that Cyborg was defragmenting has managed to be defragmented, and he's sharing that video with the League. And one thing after another, all of it just builds up to the reveal that the big mastermind behind this whole thing, and the person who holds the scepter currently, is Volko, the guy who is totally loyal to Arthur. He has stepped up and he's like, yep, when he left Atlantis, Atlantis turned against me. So now I'm getting my vengeance for that. So Volko's the big bad. I gotta say, I didn't see it coming. It was genuinely surprised, but they made it work out. At least what they're describing so far. A general vengeance plot, him coming back up. He figured Aquaman would probably be enough to break Orm into submission. It makes sense in that standpoint. As for the writing of this issue, perfectly good. I don't see any real flaws with it. My only thing is that they're really, 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 really wanting to do this Red Tornado, like lampshade hanging. They're like, hey guys, anybody remember Red Tornado? He could be right here. Anybody interested? And I'm like, aren't we doing an Atlantis thing? I feel like we should focus on that. But regardless, I do think this is a solid issue. Overall, I'd give it I'll give it a 7.5. No, I'll bump it up to an 8. I think that the reveal of Volko at the end is surprising enough and well done enough that it works. I think that it is a solid reveal, solid twist to the story. So this one's an 8. Looking forward to seeing, I think, how they wrap it up either next issue or the issue after. So we'll see where it is. The Savage Hawkman, number 16, written by Frank Tieri, art by Joe Bennett and Jack Jadson. This is the final part of the that was Hawkman Wanted. So last issue they got captured, and it turned out that Corsair, the Emperor guy, was still alive. The guy that he was literally charged for murder for. And this issue picks up with him being tortured in order to get all of the nth metal off of him. And Shire's like, hey, big bro, why didn't you tell me you were still alive? And Corsair's like, it's all part of the master plan. I had to do it. And she's like, okay, but like, you still lied to me. And he's like, shut up. Literally, I do not care about you at all. I want to get my nth metal back. And we see Carter lying on the ground with like nth metal dribbling out of him. And Carter's like, yeah, you ain't going to get my nth metal, punk. And Corsair's like, oh yeah, let's try that. And he pulls out like a laser scepter and shoots it at Carter. And he's like, there, now you're dead. And now I can take your nth metal. But wouldn't you know it, the nth metal just came around him and made armor again. And Shire's like, okay, bro, maybe we should stop attacking him. Also, he didn't murder you, which is the only crime that he was accused of, so he should be released. And so Corsair grabs her by the throat and is like, hey, I'm the Emperor, I make the rules here. And then Carter grabs him by the throat and says, don't you put your hands on her. And then this big old, size of a mountain, four-armed dude shows up, grabs Carter by the throat and says, stop shouting, I'm napping. And it turns out this guy is Thraxus, one of the great old ones that Corsair's father turned away because he was too brutal. But he's still here, and he's still alive, and he's like, all right, here's what we'll do. We'll just teleport the nth metal off of Carter and onto Corsair. And Shire's like, couple problems with that. One, that could kill both of them. And two, it would use up a lot of energy, which is kind of a big deal because we're currently orbiting around the sun. And Corsair's like, I'm sorry, did you just fucking talk to me? And she's like, no, sorry, old one, didn't mean to offend. She's like, no, you can't offend me. You're like a bug to me. Bugs can't affect people. So at that point, they set up the whole thing of the teleportation. And Corsair's like, but first, let me check on my status of my taking over of Earth. And turns out there are a whole bunch of different looking hawk people just buzzing around Earth's mountains, and they're setting up bases there, of course known as nests. And it's just like, good. Once you set up your nest on Earth, we will use it as our pivot point to take out the Zarnians and the Daemonites, because that was still our goal, if anybody remembers that. So Emma gets thrown into the same cell where Carter is, and Carter's like, hey, Emma, I don't think there's really any way out of this one. Sorry, I got us both killed. And Emma's like, don't worry about it. It's literally everything has always managed to work out. I have no reason to doubt it won't here. So teleportation thing's all set up. Corsair's hooked up to the machine, and Carter's brought in to be thrown in the other side. And Emma's forced to watch because, of course, he is. So they start doing the teleportation of the nth metal. And Emma's about to charge him, being like, no, stop it, you're killing him. But then Shiera's like, up, hold on, just wait for it. And then all of a sudden, everything starts exploding, which I don't know why. It seems like Shiera had her own men like booby trap it, but she's also blown back, so I don't know what's happening. Anyway, whole big fight breaks out. Shiera's now on the side of Carter, hands him a gun so that he's able to escape. Mind you, he isn't currently wearing his Hawk armor, so I don't know if he even still has it. But they make their way to the escape pods as this whole ship is being brought into the sun. And as they get there, Shiera gets blasted by Corsair, and Corsair's like, now we will have our final battle. And Shiera kisses Carter, says, I always loved you. I'm going to show you how much. And she pushes him into the escape pod and sends them on their way. And she's like, all right, brother, we will die here together. And Carter and Emma look out the window as the ship crashes into the sun, and Carter just goes, no. And that's it. That's Hawkman Wanted. Was it everything you dreamed it would be? Okay. I understand that sometimes you have an arc and you want to throw in a couple of extra issues in there because, hey, it's good universe building. It's good world building to have these characters cross over. But, like, the fact that this was pumped as a crossover of any meaningfulness at all is just disrespectful to the audience, because I get that squaring Hawkman's origin between Space Bird and Archaeologist is like the holy grail for Hawkman writers. Everyone wants to be able to be the one that explains, hey, here's how it actually works. But this is not the way to do it, where it's just, yeah, you forgot you were a Space Bird. Oh, silly me. I can't believe I forgot I was a Space Bird. And then after everything that happens, all the stakes that build up, what do we get out of it in the long term? It seems like it's just, there are like 6 more Hawk people who are building bases on Earth. Wow, that's going to be great for an arc. So, I don't know. It just let me down. I don't think I really went that much expecting anything, but it still found a way to let me down. So, I'm going to give this one, I got to give it like a 5. Not because I think it did anything particularly wrong, but it didn't do anything that felt worthwhile the entire time. It was just, yeah, may as well. So 5 for that, and I think this book only has like 4 more issues, so we'll see where we get by the end of it, but not looking forward to this last little bit. Teen Titans number 16, written by Scott Lobdell and Fabian Nicieza, art by Brett Booth. This is more Death of the Family, and we have Red Hood and Red Robin to pick up from both Red Hood and Teen Titans. So we open up with Red Robin and Red Hood both unconscious. Narration is all Tim Drake, Red Robin. And he's like, I can't open my eyes, but I can smell something. It smells like gun polish. Crap, am I here with Red Hood? And then all of a sudden Joker walks in. And he's like, hey, you guys awake yet? And it's like, oh, no, you're still unconscious? Well, I'm just going to tell a few jokes anyway. And he just pokes at him and prods him, saying like, oh, Red Hood, how does that mask not fog up whenever it rains? And Tim Drake, oh, imagine what I could do if I was as smart as you. Ha, 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 ha. So anyway, then he's like, all right, well, time to start the real show. And he drops some water on them to wake them both up, and they set up. And I love their little introductions to each other. It's just Red, and then they continue on. So Red Hood asks if Robin has a plan, and he's like, yeah, of course I got a plan, but just don't let the Joker get under your skin no matter what he does. And Joker appears on the TV screen, and he's like, hey, turn around. And they look behind them, and it turns out that Joker has both of their fathers here, and they have bags over their heads, and he's like, oh, don't you just love a family reunion? And then we get the other plots. So Teen Titans were meeting up with the Outlaws, and Roy Harper, a.k.a. Arsenal's like, hey, Teen Titans, you guys kind of suck, and you're not ready for Gotham. Luckily, you had me here to fix the whole Joker toxin thing. And they're like, you're right. We totally needed you. Thank you, Roy Harper. And then Solstice is like, does anybody else notice we got a little bit of a power boost? I think that and she's thinking this part, the guy named Kurt Lance is here. And then we see Kurt Lance nearby, and he's like, oh, good, they managed to handle the Joker virus outbreak. The Teen Titans might be able to be useful. And then all of a sudden he gets attacked by a member of Basilisk named Grey Laura, who was in the Suicide Squad book, and I'm pretty sure should be dead by this point, but regardless, he just takes her out because his abilities to boost people's powers also means he can take them away. And then all of a sudden he gets hit by a laser. And a speech bubble's like, sorry, soldier. We weren't going to send you in here alone. And then we cut to Hell or some other dimension. And Trigon's like, yes, because of the book Phantom Stranger, I now have my daughter Raven back. And I have turned her evil. So that's going to be a thing for the Teen Titans. So anyway, we cut back to the Joker plot. And he's like, all right, here's the deal. I am going to let one of you rescue your fathers, but you have to kill the other. And Red Robin's like, that's stupid. We know that's not even like, you wouldn't even let that happen. But then Red Hood just holds a gun to Robin's head, and Robin's like, God, you are an idiot, aren't you? So then a big old fight breaks out, and Red Robin's like, seriously, just like think through this for half a second. Like, there's no way that this could be your father. And he's like, well, what if it is? I can't take that chance. I'm going to shoot you, Red Robin. And Robin blinds him temporarily. Red Hood takes his flight suit away, so they're just fighting hand to hand. And he's like, crap, I forgot that Jason was trained by ninjas. Oh, well, I just have to hit harder, and even though he hits more often. And they keep on fighting. Robin gets his flight suit back, and Robin makes the comment here when he turns his suit into blades, quote, I could kill you right now and you'd have no idea why something you think is so easy to do is so hard for me. Okay. And then we get his internal monologue of could I do it? Could I really kill a killer in order to save two innocent men? Guess we won't have to find out. And then he uses his wingsuit to break the glass Joker's hiding behind, and Red Hood unloads an entire clip into his body. And Tim Drake's like, wow, I would never kill people, but I ain't gonna stop him. And Red Hood's like, oh, cool, great. Anyway, how do you know those weren't our real dads? And Tim's like, my dad doesn't have this scar on his forearm. And Red Hood's like, that's pretty stupid, but okay. And then all of a sudden the Joker's body starts expelling out Joker gas, or some sort of gas. And they realize, crap, that wasn't the real Joker. It was a body double. Oh, God, we're all falling asleep now. And so they pass out again. And Joker drags them to wherever it is he's going. And he's like, I'd like to punish you for not playing by the rules, but that was pretty sneaky, sis. So final panel is him all dressed up, and he's holding two serving platters covered in blood. And he's like, oh, well, it's time for the main event, the main course. Tune in to Batman number 17. Okay, so those three panels right in the middle, 3 pages, I should say, of the Teen Titans, the Outlaws, Kurt Lance, Grey Laura, Raven, and Trigon. Why? I understand that, this is a tie-in, so people who would normally not be reading your book might be tuned in order to catch this. But, 2 of those required much more prior knowledge, and one of those was a Phantom Stranger link, which, what? I understand the necessity of it to link across the universe, but I just, for a tie-in to an event like this, just tell the story of your tie-in, man. We don't need all this extra crap. I can just focus on this one thing right now. So yeah, it was a little bit annoying to me. As for the actual fight itself, I mean, the whole thing was that apparently Red Hood never was actually going to kill Robin. He was just buying time for Robin to figure out a plan or something, and he was ready to go with it. And I do like the camaraderie between Red Robin and Red Hood, where Tim's like, me and him are pretty good with each other. I don't really have that big of a deal with this whole anti-hero thing. So they fight together well. I enjoy that camaraderie. I wish it was just the sole focus of the book. But because it was mostly the focus, I will still give this one, I'll give it a 6. And I think that's mainly in the fact of it feels like an unnecessary time. It wasn't even a point where Joker was like, I'm killing you because you're bad for Batman. It's like, okay, well, Jason Todd doesn't even work with Batman, so I don't even know what in the hell you're talking about, Joker. But they didn't do that. So again, why is Jason Todd even here? They never justified it. So yeah, I know I'm long-winded on my review, but it is a very strange issue, but it still gets a 6. All-Star Western number 16, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Moritat. This is the final part of Black Diamond Probability, thank God. And last issue, we had Jonah Hex get his leg all messed up and needed to be on bed rest for a while, and Dr. Arkham be infected with the Hyde formula and have to be put into the asylum for a while. So we pick up home of Amadeus Arkham a whole month later, and we meet the nurse, who I can't remember what her name is, but Jonah's just been drinking for the entire month. He's literally not been sober for a single moment this entire month. And she's like, "You're disgusting. You need to take a bath." And he's like, "Are you going to wash me up?" And she slaps him. And he's like, "All right, well, fine, whatever. I'm going to take my lucky tomahawk and go outside." So he goes out into the garden. He loads up his pistol and seems like he's going to try to kill himself before the nurse comes out. And she's like, "Hey, what do you want for dinner?" And he's like, "I want a very specific type of bread," as he shoots the arms off of this statue nearby. And she's like, "Okay, well, we don't have that type of bread. I mean, if you could tell me how to make it." And he's like, "Whatever, just go away." So later on that night, the nurse goes home, and Amadeus's mom, Arkham's mom, starts yelling from upstairs for him. And she's screaming about, like, there are bugs in the wall and stuff like that. And Hex is like, "Oh my God, I am going to kill this woman." He picks up his tomahawk and makes his way up the stairs. And as he gets up there, he sees this woman just like brushing her hair, just like, "Oh, Edward, I knew you'd be back. Oh, Thornfield has never been the same since you left." And he's like, "What? Huh? What are you talking about?" And he goes over and picks up a book of Jane Eyre. And he flips through it and he's like, "Oh, you think that this is the book. You literally are so crazy you don't know what's real and what's the book. All right, well, I'll be back in the morning." And he spends the entire night reading the book. He reads it cover to cover. And the next morning he takes the mother out and just to get some air. And the nurse shows up being like, "Mrs. Arkham, what are you doing out here?" And Hex is like, "Don't worry, I'm keeping an eye on her. I read this whole book last night. She thinks that I'm this character in this book, and I was going up there to kill her." And she's like, "I'm sorry, you were going up there to kill her?" "Yes, I was going up there to kill her. But, I figured I'd just let her live out the fantasies, whatever." So she goes around the garden, and she puts, like, some flowers in her hair or whatever. And the nurse kind of takes a little liking to Hex, like, "Oh, you do have a kind heart underneath it all." But then at that moment, Hyde shows up, and he's like, "Hi, Jonah, it's me again." And Hex just starts screaming for the nurse and Miss Arkham to go back inside. And Hyde, like, goes up to the nurse being like, "She's got a bit of a scent about her, Hex. She smells like lilies and lilacs. I like that." And Hyde, like, throws her aside and goes over to Miss Arkham saying, like, "Oh, Miss Arkham, you're having a bit of trouble with forgetfulness, I hear. Maybe my elixir could help you." And at that point, Hex jumps up with his hatchet, puts it into Hyde's back, and just screams for them to get inside. Her name is Constance, by the way. Constance. So at that point, Hyde points out, like, "Hey, I bet that you've been..." Because Hex hadn't been drinking since last night because the nurse took away all the alcohol. Hyde's like, "Hey, I bet you're dying for a drink. And so you're not at the top of your game right now. You got the shakes and whatnot. You're no match against me." And so he throws around Hex for a little bit, saying how he came here for Arkham, but, he's more than happy to kill Hex in the meantime. And Hex throws his axe, and Hyde manages to catch it, and he's like, "Oh, that's charming. I'm going to cut off your legs with this." And as he makes his way forward to do so, Hex headbutts him and is ready to do what he can to fight back. But then Constance comes back with Hex's gun, throws it over to Hex, and Hex fires it into Hyde's stomach, which immediately transforms him back into Jekyll. And the nurse is watching like, "I'm sorry, what just happened here?" And Hex is like, "Don't worry about it. We need to get the bullets out of him. That man owes me money." So they manage to perform surgery, gets the bullets out of him, and have him strapped down so that he can get his money's worth. And Constance is like, "Mr. Arkham is set to be released from the infirmary tomorrow. Don't you care?" And he's like, "No, I got something to do." And we see in the final pages, he has made his way to a seaside cliff. He's taken the elixir that has the black diamond on top of it, and he throws it out into the sea. That's it. That's the end. And then we get one last page of setting up All-Star Western presents Stormwatch. So I don't know if we're even going to be following Hex, because we've got a bunch of different characters here that we might be following instead. Be interested to see. I'm so happy this diamond is gone. This is the last published issue out of the 4 titles that were dealing with it. Demon Knights, Team 7, All-Star Western, and some other one I can't remember. They're done. They're all done. This is the last one. And I gotta say, I don't understand what the purpose of Black Diamond Probability was. Justin Jordan, the writer of Team 7, which kind of kicked off the whole thing, also doesn't understand what it was. So I don't think there was really anything behind it. I think this was a useless little crossover that just focused on the fact of, hey, we can have Eclipso in a bunch of different places. So, yeah, I got to give this one, I like the storytelling. It was a little bit lightweight. There wasn't a whole much going into it, but it was a good little breather right in the middle of, yeah, sure, why not? Just put this in there to wrap it up. So I'll give it a 6.5. I think it's art-wise good, the beats-wise good. It just, the fact that it had to deal with Hyde one more time, I was tired of it already. It felt like it was wrapped up last issue, and this didn't feel like much of a wrap up this issue, but hey, it's done, and I'm happy with it. Batman and Robin Annual Number 1, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Ardian Syaf. It's just a nice little one-shot that doesn't really tie into much anything at the moment. So we open up in Gotham City, and Batman is fighting against some guy in a flame suit, like a big mech suit that shoots out flames, and he breaks into the top of it, and turns out it's just a kid. The kid's like, oh, please don't tell my dad, he's going to kill me, and he starts crying, and Batman's like, Jesus, kid, the police are here, stop crying. So next morning, he's slowly waking up, and Alfred's like, oh, it's lunchtime, I brought you breakfast. By the way, you're going on a trip, and he already has his bags packed, and tells him, yep, go ahead, get dressed, we're on our way. And it's only once they get on the plane somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean that Alfred gives more details. Turns out Damian has set up a bit of a scavenger hunt. He's like, look, Dad, or Father, I've been listening to you. I know that you think I haven't been paying attention, but I've set up this whole thing, and you're going to be going on a scavenger hunt to follow different clues to your family history. So first stop is in London. That's where Alfred is flying you. And then after that, you'll have to figure out where the next ones are on your own. Let's see how great of a detective you are. And Bruce is like, I'm sorry, Alfred, you knew about this? And he's like, yeah. Damian was rather persistent. And he's like, all right, well, what about my Batmaning? And he's just, it's 3 days. It'll be fine. So it says game on. And then we see back at the Batcave, Damian is going out on his own in patrol. And he gets his own bat suit on. And he goes up to Titus, his dog, and he's like, oh, you didn't really think we were going to stay in the whole weekend, did you? So he heads out into the town, and he hears radio chatter of a metahuman that attacked a gas station. And there's already a detective there named Detective Pierce, who's like, okay, so something bit through the hose of the gasoline pump and had almost 800 gallons. All right, well, we'll keep an eye out. And they're just like, you back-up grenade. You're nothing about these metahumans. And the cop's like, all right, well, didn't need that. So she starts driving away, and then Damian's sitting in the backseat like, let me see the evidence. And she freaks out and crashes her car as Damian grabs the gas pump and runs away. And the cop's like, God damn it, we don't need you, Batman. And he's like, yeah, I'm Batman. So we cut to London. It's at this hotel, this very fancy-looking hotel. And the general manager named Clint Barrington greets them. And it turns out Alfred used to act with this guy. They start getting along perfectly fine. He's like, oh, it's been years. How are things? How's everything going? And Bruce is like, I can hang out back in the room if you want to catch up. And he's like, no. I've been directed to show you this. And he walks him down the hall and shows him a painting called Unfinished Fruit. And Bruce is like, I have no idea what this means to me. And Clint explains that this was painted by Martha Wayne while she was here out at this hotel. They were enjoying some time. And turns out that she painted this. And Bruce, he got his hand in some paint. And so there's a big red handprint right on the painting. But Thomas took the painting and gave a huge sum of money to the hotel and said, you are going to hang this in the main foyer. You're going to treat it like you would a masterpiece. And you're just going to leave it up there. And in return, you get this much money. And it turns out after some deals had happened and the hotel changed hands and whatnot, they forgot about the agreement. But now it was brought to their attention by an anonymous source, a.k.a. Damian, who has said, all right, well, it's back up now. We will treat it as a masterpiece that we agreed to. So Bruce is like, oh, that's nice. So then we cut back to Gotham, some random group of thugs and some guy wearing an outfit that doesn't look familiar to me at all. They're all running out with some gear. And it's like, man, what is this, Batman Jr.? What is he going to do against us? And it says 17 seconds later, and he's literally decapacitated all of them. And we see later on, I guess the next morning, Damian is talking to his dad. He's got a green screen set up to make it look like he's at Barcelona. And he's like, oh, well, you're breaking up. Dad, I got to go. So he calls it a night, and he's trying to figure out what to do next. Bruce and Alfred are talking, and Alfred's like, there's a woman around here in London named Catherine who I've had very intimate relationships with. And Bruce is like, that's gross, but if you want to stick around here, by all means, I can go on the rest of the trip myself. You've got about 1,000 weeks of vacation time built up, so just enjoy yourself here. So at that point, Alfred's going to stick around in London as Bruce goes on. So next night, Damian's just waiting for the sun to go down so that he can go out. He's got like a wine glass filled with water and a robe on, and he's like, go down, you stupid sun. And so he starts saying, in my sleep, I started piecing together a bit more of the details. I can figure out what's going on with this gasoline thing. Why are they chewing through the gas? There are easier ways to get fuel. Something's going on here. But then his alarm goes off, and he's ready to go out in the town. And he hops in the Batmobile, and he's like, all right, the night is... And he scoots forward his seat a little bit. Mine. And then he drives off. I like these moments. So we get a whole montage of him just beating the crap out of a bunch of criminals in Gotham until the bat signal comes on. And we see it's Gordon with Detective Pierce. And Pierce is like, hey, when he gets here, I want you to talk to him. And Gordon's like, dude, chill. Okay? And all of a sudden, a goon drops down onto Pierce, and it's just like, I brought you a gift. He told me about some crazy things going on at gas stations and stuff like that. I'm getting answers as to why. And Gordon's like, wait, hold on. I recognize that voice. Is that Robin? Is that you? And as he comes around to turn off the light to see if it is Robin, Damian's already gone. So we pick up in Barcelona. Bruce comes across some kids playing soccer, and she's just like, hey, you have an American accent. I was told to give something to somebody who has an American accent. And it turns out it's a little note from Damian saying, open at exactly this location in front of this fountain. And he does, and it turns out that it was a picture of his parents on their honeymoon in Barcelona. And he lined it up perfectly with the location. And Bruce plays some soccer with the kids to just enjoy himself there. So then Damian sets up the green screen again, sends him off to Rome, and says like, all right, well, I'll meet up with you after this one. This is the last stop. But then when he turns it off, he's like, I only got one more night. I got to solve this crime. I got to make it count. So a big house fire breaks out in Gotham. He gets a kid out of the fire. And the mom's like, thank you, boy. And he's like, I'm Batman. God damn it. So they see all this stuff catching on fire, and he tries figuring out what's going on. And he sees a heat signature farther away. And when he gets down to it, he's like, oh, wait a minute. This guy's got super sharp teeth, but he's caught on fire. So what's going on here? He clearly was the one who was chewing gas, but he must have had a partner. And at that point, the big fire suit guy from the beginning of the story shows back up, and he's just like, oh, you guys beat up my son in the beginning of the issue, you bats. And now I'm going to get my revenge. He was an innocent boy who just found my prototype suit. And then Damian's like, all right, well, the police are coming. Time to freeze this show. And he puts in a Mr. Freeze thing to take out the coolant. And the guy's like, please don't tell my wife. He's going to be so mad. And he's like, dude, stop your crying. Jesus. So at that point, Detective Pierce shows up. And he literally explains the whole thing of like, I used this guy because with the organic nature of him biting through the rods, it wouldn't cause a spark on the gasoline, so I was able to siphon it all off. And then I was just going to sell this suit to like the Joker or somebody, whoever wanted to cause some problems. And Batman's like, yep, another crime solved, you're welcome, detective. And Pierce is like, I hate you so much. So then we get to Rome, and Bruce is sketching a etching of the stone to see that it carved into it says, Martha, will you marry me, from Thomas. And the guard there is like, hey, I could turn the other cheek if you really want to take it with you. And he's like, no, my parents left it here for a reason, and I'm going to leave it here as well. So Damian's on the phone. He's taking down the green screen saying like, hey, yeah, your last stop is back in London, back at the hotel. I'll meet you there. I'm actually there already. So see ya. And at that point, Damian has to haul ass to get over there. 7 hours later, he gets there. And Bruce is already there waiting. He's like, hey, look, Dick did the same stuff when he was Robin. He took advantage of me taking my business trips to go out on patrol on his own. Whatever reason you did it, I'm proud of you. You did a great job, and it really did mean a lot to me. And she's like, yeah, well, it's no big deal, Father. I'm really happy to do it. So then we get a bit of an epilogue outside the Old Globe Theater, where Alfred apparently was joining in on the show of the Two Gentlemen of Verona, where the woman that he loved was the stage manager. And they're waiting outside the cast door, and all of a sudden Alfred comes storming out, and he's like, the nerve of that woman, giving me stage directions in the middle of the show. Gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I will personally fly us out of London tonight. Screw her. And they just look at each other like, okay, well, do you need to give back the costume, Alfred? And Alfred's like, Master Bruce, shut your face. In the end. This was just a fun story. This was a nice little one-off. It set up emotional beats. It set up funny moments. I enjoyed this through and through. I'm going to give this one... Honestly, I'm going to give it a 9. I really think this one was a high-quality issue. It did a great job of setting up Bruce and Damien's dynamic. It gave Alfred something to do. It gave his own little backstory. It set up more stuff with Bruce and discovering his own family history. This was just fantastic throughout. So I'm giving this one a 9. Really do enjoy it. Really do recommend it. So we'll pick up next issue with wherever that goes. Batman Incorporated number 7, written by Grant Morrison, art by Chris Burnham. So this issue picks up right where the last one left off, Bruce Wayne being thrown off of a building, and everyone's watching on as he falls, and then whoops, wouldn't you know, some man-bats just grab him right out of the sky. And Nightwing, Jason Todd, and Tim Drake are all watching on, and they're like, okay, yeah, this is an issue now. So they all lay out the plan, what they need to do. Jason Todd, as Wingman, goes to reconvene with the other members of Batman Incorporated at the Eastern Batcave. Tim Drake is going to follow the tracking signal that's inside Batman's belt, and Nightwing's just going to deal with whatever's going on here. But first we get a cutaway to a decaying whale in a giant vat by two people named Tractor and Spydra. And they call into Batwing just being like, yep, the beast was birthed here. It was inside this whale. And Batwing's like, okay, I'll pass that along. You guys need to get out of there, though, because there's company coming. And we see a whole bunch of man-bats and helicopters approaching. And Tractor and Spider are like, nope, we're staying and fighting. And Batwing's like, that's a very bad idea. And he's like, don't care. It's what we're doing. So we see Gordon is talking to Batwing, trying to tell him, like, hey, you're bleeding. You should probably go talk to somebody. As Nightwing is consoling Cyril, the squire to Knight, who died during the battle. And Nightwing goes up to Commissioner just being like, hey, Commissioner, you should know this is Talia al Ghul. She's targeting Gotham. And at that point, Commissioner Gordon's like, yeah, okay, look, my shift was over 3 hours ago. We need to contact England in order to tell them Knight is dead. Like, the hostages are all dead. This is all gone to hell. So then we see inside the Batcave, and it's Damian talking to Alfred, basically saying, like, none of this would have happened if I was with him. If it was Batman and Robin, like, I would have been there. We could have done this. And Alfred's just trying to give him some food, just being like, yes, okay, you still need dinner, Master Damian. So Wingman hops on the line with Alfred, and he's like, hey, this is Wingman, we screwed up bad, we got to figure out what to do. And he says he's on his way to Batcave East, just to update them. So Damian, he's playing with the cat, Alfred, and he's like, oh, I finally managed to tame him. Took a few hours, but it finally managed to happen, and he tames Alfred, and he's like, all right, here's the deal. I've managed to suss out who that big guy is. He's me. And Damian gives the backstory on the big guy, who I know is named Heretic. Turns out that when Damian was being cast out of the Al Ghul family, he saw an artificial baby being born, and then apparently, in some stories we didn't see in this, they came across an illegal biofactory where a whale carcass was used in order to breed this artificial baby up to like an adult age. It hatched, and then they used a designer super people, a generation of designer super people, to test him and make him the best weapon ever. And that's what Tractor and Spydra were. And then now he is fully formed as Damian's kind of half-brother, or even full brother. I don't know. All a bit confusing. So at that point, Jason Todd arrives at the Batcave, and Damian throws out there like, well, maybe Jason Todd is in league with Talia. After all, she was kind of responsible for bringing him back a little bit. And Alfred's like, nah, he still has too much to prove to your dad. It ain't him. But then we see Jason arriving at the Batcave. He is surprised by one of the other members of Batman Incorporated named Hood, who's like, hey, Batman Incorporated is over, and my first loyalty is to Spiral, as he shocks Jason into submission. So then we cut over to Talia, who's getting something out of a safe called Ouroboros, and it's from someone named Otto Netz, who, again, I think all this was beforehand, but apparently this is the meta bomb trigger, and it is able to trigger the meta bomb. I don't know what that means yet. I don't think they've set it up, but regardless, they have Batman's utility belt, and it's like, all right, well, this thing's signaling out for his allies. What do we do with it? And she's like, just leave it here. So then Tim Drake follows the signal. He ends up at the location just after they left. He sees the utility belt draped around one of the statues' necks, and then Talia activates a bomb, which blows Tim Drake out of the window. He's okay, though. So at that point, Tim Drake, he tries cutting over the radio, and he's like, hey, if anyone can hear me, they're on their way to Wayne Tower. That's where it's all going to go down. We gotta get over there. But no one's able to hear his message. At that point, a bunch of kids have gotten off of a local school bus, and they start with sharp-pointed sticks and Molotov cocktails coming after Gordon and Nightwing, shouting Leviathan rises. So they're under mind control or something. We cut to Wayne Tower. A young girl and a security guard are talking in the doorway. Another security guard comes up, shoots the first security guard while screaming Leviathan rises. He's about to shoot the girl, but she manages to get away. As Talia enters, and he's forced to stand at attention to give her proper space, and Talia's like, all right, Wayne Tower now belongs to Leviathan. Defend it with your lives. So he looks back for the young girl, can't find her. And then we see them carrying this safe all the way upstairs, and inside the safe is Batman. And Talia is just like, hey, we're on top of Wayne Tower. I'm about to drop you into your rooftop pool. The whole reason we did all that stuff, you climbing up that tower, was more for theatrics. We were studying your, reaction time and how much your strength and all that. We were getting readings on you so that we knew exactly how long it would take you to break out of this safe. Because we know you're going to break out of this safe, but we're going to pause all of our plans to go into motion just a few seconds before you break out, before you could even possibly break out. So that way you're still going to be too late no matter what. And so Damian, he realizes, this is going to be my mother's master stroke. She's going to be doing all of this now. That's why she's taking Batman. I need to get out there, Alfred, and you can't stop me. But Alfred's like, I'm not even going to try. You could tell him that you overpowered me, but here's your suit. And Damian starts getting dressed up. He tells Alfred to take care of his animals while he's gone. However, there is a vocal lock on the door, and Alfred's like, well, you're not going to be able to get out through that because you'd have to imitate your father's voice perfectly, which he does. And Alfred's like, oh, okay, sure. And so Damian makes his way over to a jetpack rocket suit that he's able to use to get there a lot faster. And next issue is a Bloody Robin symbol. And I know what happens next, but I'm not going to spoil it. So this is a kind of just more of a setup issue. It's just, okay, we have set up all the pieces to where we need them to be, but now we're explaining why they're all there. We're saying this is why this is happening, this is why that's happening, and it's just kind of explaining it all out. And I think it does a good job of explaining the pieces that we saw, but it is so heavily reliant on stuff that happened before the New 52 reboot that I really could have used a little, extra explanation there. It just kind of assumed, yes, Tractor and Spydra, you remember them, right? And I'm like, was I supposed to? So couple issues, but I do think that is a pretty okay issue. I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 6.5. It's not bad. It's setting up some big stakes, but I do think they should have taken a little bit extra time with it. So, yeah, whatever. Batman the Dark Knight number 16, written by Gregg Hurwitz, art by Ethan Van Sciver. So, if the cover didn't give it away, it's Mad Hatter story. So we open up with a whole bunch of kidnappings happening across the city. Everyone's freaking out in Gotham. And there's apparently no pattern to it as far as Batman can discern. He's genuinely unable to find one. But he does pick up that there's going to be a massive kidnapping of people down at some place in Chinatown. Cops aren't able to make it in time. He manages to fly in with the Batplane, but they've got really, really big guns, and they actually manage to shoot down the Batplane. And just before it crashes, we get this little side scene like straight out of the movie The Dark Knight, where there's this kid firing a toy gun and he's firing it out the window, and then all of a sudden there's an explosion, and he's like, "Oh, did I do that?" So that plane crashes, and he's like, "Hey, Alfred, could you send some replacement wheels? I've got to deal with this." So all the goons started trying to beat up Batman. A couple of them are still kidnapping people, and they only really managed to grab one person in this van that Batman's paying attention to. He throws some batarangs into one of the guy's legs, whose wig comes off. It'll come into play later. And so he's unable to make it to the van, so all of his fellow goons just fill him with bullets so that he can't talk to Batman. And Batman's like, "Crap, my wheels aren't here. All I've got is my plane, which can't fly, but it does still have its own wheels." So he turns on the bat plane, leaves out the landing gear, and then just uses it as basically a car down the street. And it immediately shoots past the van and fast enough to tear off its doors. And he blasts apart the other side of the van, jumps in, like, just straight across the van and grabs the kidnapped woman. And the woman, in this horrible fiery explosion that's causing all these people to die, she's like, "Oh, Batman, you saved me." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm not good at the whole post-traumatic stuff, so, oh, look, my wheels are here," as the bat cycle just lands next to him. And he's like, "Police will help you by." And so he drives off. Meanwhile, we cut back to Bruce Wayne arriving at his mansion, and it turns out that his girlfriend Natalia was there, and she's like, "You forgot, and that's fine, I guess, but like, we need to talk about this." And so she starts playing a little ditty on the piano, and she goes through this whole rigmarole, like, "Bruce, I get it, we're the same type of person, but like, I've been able to overcome my stuff, but I feel like you're just kind of stuck in the past of it, and you're really not like opening up to anybody else, and like, you don't tell me where you go, and I don't know where you go unless I do." And Bruce is like, "I'm sorry, you know what?" And she's like, "Look, I'm not saying I know anything about anything. I know about my childhood, I know about all that stuff, but I know who you are, Bruce." And Bruce is like, "No, you don't." And she's like, "I have to go now. All you have to do is just tell me. And like, this will be okay. But if I leave and like, you don't tell me what I need to hear, we're done. Like, we're not coming back from this." And he's like, "Yeah, I got to go too." And so they go their separate ways, and we see Alfred looking on, and he's just like, "Oh, Master Bruce, you messed it up again." So then we cut to the Iceberg Casino, where Penguin's just doing some bookkeeping, and Batman shows up, and he's like, "Hey, I know you're behind this. They have big weapons, and you've got money to buy it. Also, one of the guys was wearing a top hat, and you kind of got that whole hat thing on lockdown." And Penguin's like, "As much as I would love to say I was behind that, you are clearly forgetting that there is one other hat-related villain in Gotham." And Bruce is like, "Crap." And so he goes off. And then we see a nightclub called the Wild Hare, which they Tweedledum and Tweedledee and a mysterious third figure that we can't possibly know who it is watching the security cameras trying to track down a specific type of person. And it just kind of seems vague and unsure as to what it is. But then they finally pick out one guy and send Tweedledum and Tweedledee to go get him. And Tweedledee is like, "Hey, do you want me to make you a real drink?" And we see Mad Hatter sitting there saying, "No, the tea is fine." So we cut back to the original crime scene where Batman swoops in. He picks up the wig that fell off and sees a mind control device inside of it. And he's like, "Oh, crap, this is Mad Hatter." So then we see the guy that was picked out of a crowd. He's thrown a script and a jacket to wear. And he's like, "Say the line. Say the line. Just do it right now." And he's like, "I don't know why am I here?" And he's like, "Just say the line. Say it." And he's like, "Okay, right this way." He's like, "Was it written as a question?" "No, it was written as a statement." "Say it as a statement." He's like, "Right this way." And he's like, "Nope, you're not going to work." And he blows the guy's head off. And he's like, "Well, let's find another one. We'll figure out what's up." Meanwhile, we see a whole crowd of people are setting up something in the background. And this guy comes up and he's like, "Hey, Mr. Hatter, me and the others, we were talking. Maybe we should stop this. This seems kind of crazy." And Mad Hatter looks up at the guy and he's like, "Tweedledee, get my step stool." And Tweedledee brings out the step stool and he stands up on the step stool and he's like, "I appreciate you for telling me your feelings. You and some of the others." And then he just launches on this guy's face and throws his thumbs into his eye sockets. And everyone else looks at it and then keeps on working. And that's where it leaves off of this horrific panel of him just gouging out this guy's eyes. Well, it looks creepy. I'll give it that. Dear Lord. There is something deeply unsettling about the way that Mad Hatter is drawn here. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about the Natalia stuff, because I don't feel like it has been properly set up. Like, yes, it has been pretty much since the beginning of this book. We've been dealing with, Natalia and the way that she impacts Bruce. But, like, it's always been, like, a D plot. Not even a B plot or a C plot. It's always just been the most back burner. So, I don't know. The fact it's over, or maybe it's not, that's what I'm saying. I don't know how to feel about it. As for the Mad Hatter stuff, I think it's an interesting little detective story. You know, he doesn't really detect much of anything, but it's just a cool... This is the action movie book. This is literally... He drives his bat plane down the road and then blows out the side of a van. It's the action movie book, and I think it works. Overall, I gotta give this one, like, probably a 7. It's not the highest quality. It doesn't have that little extra oomph to push it over, but it's not doing anything wrong by any means. It's just a decent little turn off your mind sort of action story in Detective Comics, except Batman Dark Knight. You know what I mean. It's Batman focused. Talon number 4, written by James Tynion IV and Scott Snyder, art by Guillem March. So last issue, Calvin was caught by the big Talon that was sent out to get him, and they're still in the middle of their job of robbing the court. So this issue picks up same spot, and he's like, yeah, you know, I used to have dreams about a giant monster Talon coming after me, and I always was happy when I woke up, because I realized I was stupid. Don't feel so stupid anymore. So Sebastian's over the phone, and he's like, hey, whatever happens, you're being attacked by this Talon, get the little Ethernet cable back into the room so it doesn't sever the connection. And so he's like, yeah, okay, working on it, thank you. So he starts looking up which Talon this is, trying to get any information on it, but the system is unable to come up with anything. And Calvin manages to throw the receiver back into the room so it can do its job. And then he shoots a grappling hook as the massive Talon throws him away. And the grappling hook basically dislocates his shoulder, so he's unable to do anything with it. Meanwhile, Sebastian's looking in his big old book of everything regarding the Court of Owls, and he comes across a page of the Gotham Butcher, and he's like, oh crap, they brought back the Gotham Butcher, Jesus Christ. So meanwhile, the owner of the bank is trying to get back into his office, which has been locked up, and he's like, wait a minute, this whole robbery thing's a sham, they just wanted into my office. So he calls that over the radio, and the security officer there manages to catch that the NYPD that are there are actually working with Calvin. So he's like, wait a minute, you're not police. So anyway, we cut back to Calvin, who's down on the street now, and the butcher just lands on the car right next to him, and he's like, oh, good, you're still alive. I'm going to make fun out of this. Cut back into the bank, and they're fighting the security guard, but they're like, yeah, we know you're a Talon, and we also know how to deal with you. This is a Mr. Freeze gun. Pew, and it just freezes him. And he's like, well, that's all we needed to do. Meanwhile, up in the bank office, they're now breaking down the door, and he's like, well, I'd love to stay and chat, but my job's done. Peace. And a guy named, I think, Nicky, whichever one of them, he flies out on a wingsuit. So at that point, it's like, okay, all of that may or may not have worked, but right now the biggest concern is the fact that Calvin is getting the ever-loving crap knocked out of him. And we see he's literally punched through a solid marble sign, and Calvin's like, okay, I'm going to run now. And the butcher just grabs him by the head and is just like, no, you're not going anywhere. I'm going to bash you around a few bits. And he keeps on just putting his head through some car windows. And Calvin's like, okay, I think I'm going to die now. Sebastian, could you tell Casey something? And he's like, no, I got a plan. There's a sewer grate right next to you. On the count of 3, jump down. 1, 2, 3. And he jumps down into it. And the Gotham Butcher immediately comes down after him. But it turns out that they timed it that way so that he could grab onto the back of a passenger subway. And so he makes his way, and the Gotham Butcher's forced to just look on as he drives away. Meanwhile, the owner of the bank checks the accounts, and they have all been 100% depleted. They have succeeded in the job they needed to do. So Calvin meets back up with Casey back at base. She relocates his shoulder, and he's just like, do you get it now? How dangerous they could be? And she's just like, hey, we made it out. I don't see any problems with this. It seems fine to me. And they don't know where we are. And then all of a sudden, Sebastian comes up on the line. He's like, hey, your suit got a tracker on it. They're coming for you now. And all of a sudden there's a banging at the door, and Nicky goes up, and he's got his gun drawn. Gotham Butcher just pries open these solid steel doors and crushes Nicky's head in his hands. And immediately everybody's like, no, Nikki, we cared about him so deeply. And Casey locks down the situation like, okay, first things first. It's two of you people. We need you to get all these people out of here into our escape system. Take my daughter with. I will try to catch up if I can. Tell her how much I love her. Meanwhile, as soon as they leave, Casey's like, okay, I gotta stay back here and wipe the computers, and that guy's gonna find me. It's practically suicide. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna let you kill yourself. Look, Sebastian, is this dude just a normal Talon? Can we beat him the normal ways? And he's like, yeah, probably. It's like, okay, I'm gonna stay back. I'm gonna beat him. Is there any place I can get him really cold? And she's like, yeah, there's an old escape route, but you'll be stuck back there as well. And he's like, yeah, but you'll be able to escape. So all the people are being loaded up into an escape route train. The younger daughter, Sarah's like, where's my mommy? And she's like, oh, don't worry, your mommy's coming, but you need to get on the train now. And the doors start closing, and Sarah gets out onto the other side. And she's like, no, God damn it, Sarah, come back. So Casey's wiping the system, and she's like, do you think there's any chance he's going to be able to do it, Sebastian? And he's like, I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. We've had 3 issues of him doing crazy shit. But then she turns and sees Sarah's there, and she's like, oh, God, baby, don't worry. We're going to get out of here. We're going to be fine. She finishes wiping the system and starts making the escape. Meanwhile, Gotham Butcher has tracked down Calvin, and he's like, hey, I know you're here, Rose. Meet your death like a man. Stop running. And he's like, oh, I'm not running. I'm waiting right here. He's like, oh, this is a trap. You think you've trapped me? You do understand that I will kill you. I will get out of whatever way you think you have managed to one-up me, and then I will kill everything you've ever loved, including Casey and Sarah. And he's just like, okay, well, here's my trap plan. Turns out that we're right underneath the Hudson River, and at this time of year, it has freezing temperatures. Do it now! And then all of a sudden, the route unloads the Hudson River on top of the Butcher, drowning him away underneath the water, supposedly freezing him. And he's like, oh, this is not over. I'll get my revenge. And we see Sarah and Casey watching from the side of the river. And she's like, okay, honey, well, we got to start running again because we got to set things back up for the network. And then she hears a voice behind her and she's like, actually, no, I think you've had enough running. Turns out Calvin managed to survive. He just outran the giant wall of water. And he's like, don't worry, we're going back to Gotham. We're going to lay down roots there, and you're going to help me take down the Court of Owl once and for all. And we're never going to see the Butcher ever again as we see his hand come out of the water. Because, of course, I'm just going to say right now, hard for me to get it across. The art and the writing make this the most anime book I have read from DC ever. Like, so much of this is just like anime tropes just thrown into this, and I don't dislike that, but I just get that vibe the entire way through, especially the whole we'll never see him again, and then the oh my god, the hand coming out of the water. So yeah, it's a fine book. I think maybe it could have benefited from having an extra issue here of just pacing it out better, because we had the whole him getting back to base, him getting fixed up, and then he has to do it again all in one issue. It just seems like there could have been a bit more of emotional pacing there, but I don't hate the way they did it either. So I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 6.5. It doesn't feel right to call it a 7, but it is still above average. So yeah, 6.5, feeling pretty good about it. And I guess we'll see just how soon the Gotham Butcher returns to Gotham. Seems like it'd be pretty damn quick. The Flash number 16, written by Francis Manapul and Brian Buccellato, art by Francis Manapul. So last issue, Barry came out of his speed coma with the realization that he has to give himself up to Grodd in order to succeed. And then we open up this issue with a flashback to 5 years ago where Barry goes on a date with Iris. And he's just trying to figure out, like, is this an actual date? And she's like, do you want it to be? And he's like, I mean, kinda, yeah. And she's like, all right, then it's a date. And all of a sudden, she has a folder full of papers that start blowing away. Flash grabs them, and he's like, wait a minute. These are, like, arrest papers for your brother who's in jail. You just wanted to use me for my police knowledge. This isn't a real date at all. And she's like, no, that's not the total truth. And he's like, oh, whatever. I see what you're doing here. This could have been something great, Iris, but you gave it up. And he storms off. Cut back to now, and Patty and Barry are laying in bed, and she's just like, you sure you got to give up yourself to Grodd? And he's like, yeah, like I've gone through every other path. There's literally no other way that everyone else can be safe. Like this is the only path where he might leave Central City alone. And I might find a way out of it. And Patty's like, okay, but like he might also not leave the city alone. So is that really worth it? And she tries to convince Barry to stay, but he's also like, no, okay, we don't have to talk about the fact that I know who you are now. It's just, you get out there, you do what you need to do. And they say I love you to each other as he speeds off to give himself up to Grodd. And he literally just goes straight to Grodd. It's like, hey, you looking for me? So cut to the middle of Central City where the rogues are trying to protect the people who are inside all these buses that the guerrillas have taken. They use their powers to get the guerrillas off of the buses and then start transporting them into the mirror dimension. And one of the buses has Daniel West in there, and he's like, oh, geez, first the guerrillas, now the rogues. I didn't want to get mixed up in all this. I got to find a way off this bus quick. But before they can really do anything, the police arrive. And just like, all right, anything that looks like a gorilla, shoot it. Also, the rogues are here, which I might do something about that too. And Captain Cold's like, whoa, hey, we're the good guys right now. We've been protecting this city. Don't take fire on us. Then we cut back to 5 years ago again, Iron Heights prison, where Iris meets up with her brother. And he's basically like, you screwed up the thing with Barry. He was the only person who could look over the evidence and maybe find a way to get me out of here. I'm serving 5 to 10 years, sis. What are you doing? And she's like, I hurt a good man, Daniel, and you made me do that. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I messed up your big date with Barry Allen. The guy sucks. And so that's that. Meanwhile, we meet up with Iris inside the Speed Force as she and the other people who were trapped in there hop inside of a tank to protect themselves from a rampaging mammoth. And they're basically just trying to tell the one Asian guy there, like, hey, you look like you'd be good with technology. And he's like, I'm not going to deal with that right now. Also, I don't know how to work a tank. And they all just try to figure out how to make it work. But then all of a sudden, the dude hands lights up with Speed Force energy. And he's like, I'm feeling kind of weird. And then the tank just kind of explodes. Like, you know, with like a gunfire. Like it's away from the mammoth. Back to Flash. He's been chained up by Grodd. And Grodd just spends an extremely long time ranting and raving about, like, you just want to preserve the status quo with your lightning powers. I want to bring my people into the new world. That is why I should deserve the power, and I will take it from you. Do you have anything to say? And Flash just doesn't say anything. He's like, it really makes me feel bad when you don't say anything back. And so he throws a spear at Flash, and Flash is like, hey, I remember that thing that the other monkey said to me, of the mind will always be faster. And he's like, I just have to use my powers in a new way. And so he uses his powers to vibrate, and he manages to use the powers the same way that Salivar used his powers, which is he teleports himself and Grodd into the Speed Force. So they are no longer in Central City. And he's like, yep, I use my mind to bring you here. We're inside the Speed Force. I can just do that, I guess. And Grodd's like, that's stupid. I feel the Speed Force coursing through me. I am super powered now. And Flash is like, maybe so. But in here, I'm the king. And we're going to see if the only way out of here is for you to get through me. And so they do the whole run up to punch each other. But before they do, the tank lands in between them. And Iris rolls out. And Flash is like, what? Iris, what are you doing here? So, yeah, that's that. I don't think this is the end of the arc. I do think that, you know, we're still dealing with Grodd. But it does feel like this is kind of a Deus Ex in a lot of ways, in that it's just like, oh yeah, I can do stuff with the Speed Force. And I guess that's kind of been the whole Flash run, is him discovering his powers. It is a very new Barry in terms of he hasn't been doing this for very long. He just discovered his ability to use his speed mind, and now he can go into the Speed Force and bring other people there as well. I'm not saying that it's unheard of. I mean, he went into the Speed Force before when he went too fast. Maybe this is just an extension of that. But it does feel very strange that he's just able to pull this out at the perfect moment to stop himself from being killed. I don't dislike it. I think the art is good. I think it's balancing a bunch of different plots very well. But it just kind of seems like a little bit of a Deus Ex on Barry's part of like, oh yeah, this new power I didn't know I could do. I suddenly realized it as a spear was hurtling towards my face. So I'm going to give this one mostly for the art because it does look fantastic. I'm going to give it a 7.5 sounds too high. 7 sounds harsh, but I'm going to go with the 7. It is very good, though. I would definitely recommend. Maybe not this particular arc as a jumping on point, but the run as a whole has been very good. The Fury of Firestorm, number 16, written and art by Dan Jurgens. So last issue, Captain Atom exploded in order to save Ronnie and Jadson as Firestorm, and he's just not coming back. And this issue picks up with Ronnie gaining consciousness at the bottom of a lake, and Jadson's like, okay, I'm kind of afraid of drowning. Can we please get out of the lake? And he's like, yeah, sure. Hey, where's Captain Atom? And Jadson's like, I literally saw him explode into a bunch of millions of pieces that maybe have gone through time. I don't think he's coming back. I mean, we can go look for him if you want, but I think we might have killed Captain Atom. He's like, no, we didn't kill him. He sacrificed himself. Isn't that what happened? And they're just trying to figure out what's going on. Meanwhile, the Continuum is still keeping an eye on him and is just like, okay, well, Captain Atom's gone. This guy's still here. What do we do? They look at Dr. Magala. He's still comatose. And it's like, all right, I guess let's send out the robot again, since that's literally all we have to do. Let's just see what happens. At that point, Ronnie and Jadson are like, okay, well, I don't see Captain Atom anywhere. The homecoming game is tonight. I got to get back there. Our coach is going to bench me. And so they fly on back, not knowing the robot is on their trail. However, they fly so fast that they get there and the robot wasn't able to track them, but he has a general idea as to where they ended up. So at that point, Ronnie's heading in for the game, and they square the whole thing about, hey, are you still upset I cheated on my paper? And Jason's like, nah, it's whatever. Go win the game. So the robot's flying around over the, football field. Turns out that it is towards the end of the game, the Vikings, which is the Ronnie's team, are down by 5, or maybe it's the Monarchs. I don't know. I literally can't tell. Regardless, the whole thing is that they're just enjoying the game, and then all of a sudden the robot flies over top of the field, and it's not managed to track them down there, but they're like, okay, this thing's going to find us sooner rather than later. We got to figure out what's up. Ronnie focuses on the game. Meanwhile, Jadson, he makes his way down to the lighting section of the field. We see that they've made some great plays, and they're doing awesome jobs, and they just need to run one more play to go score a touchdown and win the whole thing. And at that exact moment, Jadson, he figures out, okay, I'm going to turn off the lights on the field, and therefore they won't be able to see me and Ronnie transform. And Ronnie makes the catch, touchdown, they win the game. Jadson turns off the lights and then runs back out there and says, hey, we got to turn to Firestorm now. Robot's flying overhead. So they turn back into Firestorm, they fly away from the field, and then Ronnie's ready to start fighting it, but Jason's like, hold on. I think we could deal with this a lot faster if you just let it catch us. And he's like, what? He's like, yeah, like put up a fake fight, but just let it catch us. And so he does. And the scientists in the Continuum are like, that was even easier than last time. Fantastic. So it flies them back, and Jason's like, okay, here's the thing. When we get there, we know how to take apart this robot now. We can just easily take care of all of them. They're not going to be a threat. So the robot arrives. It starts opening up. Ronnie uses the powers to just immediately disintegrate the robot, and then he blasts the ceiling and says, I've made it so that it'll start to melt slowly. Therefore, this entire base will come apart by tomorrow morning. And then he turns his back to start fighting the rest of the ninja people that were there at 3 issues ago. However, apparently Ronnie did something wrong with the formula, and the ceiling is coming apart very rapidly. It starts disintegrating above them. But he starts just taking apart all the ninja people. Meanwhile, Dr. Magala comes back. He wakes up, and seemingly, I swear to God, he needed a computer to talk before, but now he's just able to talk normally. And it doesn't look like he has crippling, whatever disease anymore, so I don't know. But regardless, he wakes up and he's like, oh my, who's that being with the flaming hair? And it's like, my God, Dr. Magala has forgotten everything over the past few weeks. So Firestorm just starts bringing down the house. He attacks all the people who are attacking him. And then he's about to just leave them all to die down here in this underground bunker. And Jason's like, no, we can't let people die. And he's like, fine, whatever. And so he blasts them all up and gets them out of the building. And he's like, yeah, remember, Firestorm's the one who saved you. So at that point, a short time later, General Eiling shows up, and he's like, hey, did you kill Captain Adam? And he's like, I don't think we did. He's like, darn, would have really been cool of you to do that. Anyway, you are dangerous, and I need to keep an eye on you. And Firestorm's like, no, we're not. We didn't want to do any of this. They literally brought it to our doorstep. And he's like, regardless, you're still dangerous to national security. We're going to keep an eye on you. And he's like, all right, screw it, whatever, I'm out. Bye, General Guy. And he flies away, and General Eiling's not happy with it. But then we see someone else watching on, and they're just describing the whole plot of Firestorm up till now. It's like there used to be a bunch of them, but now there's only one. And they caused all this crazy stuff to happen. Like they defaced Mount Rushmore. And so then another voice is like, what? So you're saying they're a bad guy? And the voice at the front is saying, what I'm saying, Kid Flash, is that we need to find out. It's Red Robin, Kid Flash, and Solstice of the Teen Titans. And they're now on Ronnie Raymond and Jason Rush's tail because why not? So, yeah, I mean, I could not care less about that little cliffhanger bit that genuinely shuts it down a bit for me. But as for the rest of the book, it kind of just felt like the Captain Adam thing is a story that they wanted to tell. They got to that point, they set up all the things they wanted to, and then they're like, oh crap, wait, there is still an entire like science division that would still be after him. We just need to wrap that up in a bow as well. And so they just took a little extra issue to do that, and then also threw in the homecoming game thing because they're like, oh yeah, we also set that up in an earlier plot. It just felt like bad pacing to me, where this thing that honestly, I wouldn't have given a second thought if they had just said like, and then they all disappeared. Instead, they did this whole thing of he gets captured by them again. He goes back. He deals with them all a lot easier than he did last time. And the one guy who would know his identity conveniently just has month-long amnesia. Sure, why not? It's like I gotta give it like a 5.5. And that sounds harsh, but it really is just, I don't feel like this book has an identity right now. This book, I liked the high school stuff, but it is just kind of, now that we're going into the Teen Titans, it's like, okay, are we doing, he's focused more as a teenager? Are we doing this thing with the national security? Like, what are we focusing on here? And it doesn't seem to have a good answer. I hope to be proved wrong, but I don't think I will be. I, Vampire number 16, written by Joshua Hale-Fialkov, art by Scott Clark, Fernando Blanco, and Zyman Krudransky. So last issue we left off with the good guys meeting up with Kane and the bad guys in the Van Helsing pocket dimension of their armory. This issue picks up with Kane basically giving his backstory to the good guys because they want to know how to beat Andrew. So he's like, yeah, I was walking through the desert. I came across this woman. She was like super weak and she was just crawling in the sand. She was very pretty. And I realized that just by instinct, I had to bite her. And she screamed out my name, and I don't understand how she even knew that. But yeah, I went ahead and drank some of her blood. And then turns out they're all in a London pub just discussing this. And he's just like, that makes no sense. Why would you bite the first person you see? That literally doesn't make any sense. And Kane's like, hey, I don't know. I can't change my behavior. I don't know what to tell you. But that bite made her my bride, Lilith. And after a while, she came to again. She rose and she was like, where am I? And she realized that she was on the verge of death and she was given new life. She equates Kane to God himself. And Kane's like, no. I'm better than him because I love all my children. And they start making out again. And then we cut inside of the Van Helsing armory where everyone's just looking around, including the guy who was set to guard it, like the librarian before. I'm not even sure what his name is, but he's like, oh God, you turned me into a vampire? I was part of the Van Helsings, man. Why you gotta turn me into a vampire? And he's like, well, you can test your luck if you want to go back out and talk to your new bosses. Don't think they're gonna like you though. Anyway, help us out finding what we need in here. And everyone else, don't touch anything. Meanwhile, Charles Thompson literally just picks up some random crap, and Andrew's like, dude, what did I just say? And at that point, Tig also goes to touch something, and it looks like it's just a big rock. But as she lays her hand on it, her hand literally just dissolves. And she's like, Tig, that's why I'm telling you guys not to touch something. But Andrew and the librarian realize what it is. They call it the rock that touched heaven. and it's going to open up a door to hell. And as they walk around a little bit, they accidentally activate a trap, and a whole bunch of monsters start coming out of the walls. So Kane is still continuing his story about how him and Lilith found a home or whatever. And we have, I'm blanking on her name, but the one vampire lady, she jumps in. She's like, oh my God, I do not have the time for this. We need to find a way to get Andrew back to normal. So if any of this relates, please go ahead and tell us. But for now, I'm stepping out. And so she walks out, and as she gets outside, she's trying to just get some air, and someone comes up and tries to talk to her, and she's like, oh yeah, no, look, I'm not here to talk to any locals. But it turns out it's John Constantine. He's stepping up, and he has some words to share with her. So back inside the pocket dimension, all the monsters are attacking the vampires, and then the patchwork giant Van Helsing guy comes out of the book, and he's like, what are you guys doing in my book? And Andrew's just like, oh yeah, it's this guy. Hey, anyone ever tell you have a really tiny head in comparison to your body? So the fight starts breaking out. The rock monsters attack the group. Thomas protects Tig because he sees her as kind of a girlfriend. And meanwhile, Andrew basically vaults over the big guy, tears off his head, and puts it onto the brick. And so it starts dissolving his head. And it turns out that this brick is from the Tower of Babel. So it actually has heavenly magic attributed to it because it touched heaven. So meanwhile, it's bothering me. I forget her name now. Mary. There it is. So Mary's talking to Constantine, and he's just like, you should have told me Andrew was back to evil. And it's like, well, we thought we could help him. You would just want to kill him. And it's like, no. The world needs Andrew Bennett. We just need him to be good. I would try to help him. And Constantine uses some magic to show the Van Helsing castle just completely annihilated and destroyed by Andrew. And she's like, how many vampires does he have? And Constantine just tells him 4. He has 4 vampires, and he managed to do this thing that you were unable to do with an army. He is so dangerous to be left bad. We need to get him turned back to good. So we see the vampires inside the dimension have all taken out. The monsters, they're all taken care of. And Tig comes across a locket that her father had when he was turned into a vampire. And it has a picture of her inside. And she's trying to figure out how they have it. But meanwhile, the librarian guy comes up with a plan in order to move the brick without their own bodies being attacked. So cut back to Kane's story. Turns out that they had many children. They had a huge amount of vampire babies. And all of a sudden, one of them was killed by someone, an army, a cult of destroyers. And they were able to feel that. Lilith and Kane were able to feel their child dying. And Lilith's anger that someone killed one of her babies is the first time that they ever transformed into their beast form. So at that point, Kane is like, yeah, we went out, we killed everyone that was a part of that cult, but the secret still spread. People saw us even when we tried not to. And that's where the Van Helsing kind of group came from, the vampire hunters. And at that point, Constantine and Mary walk in and it's just like, yep, and Andrew just killed all of them. We know where they are. We got to go now. And Kane's like, don't you guys want to know how I was trapped? And they're like, no, we're done. Bye. And it seems that Kane still has some powers, despite being de-vampirized, because he disappears into a cloud of smoke. So back over to the vampires inside the dimension. They draw a magical circle and they say, okay, so this was built as a repository for Kane, so it should work that we should be able to trap the brick and move it however we need to. So everyone get inside this circle and we'll move the brick. And Tig comes to the realization that the Van Helsing group killed her father. Her father was out hunting vampires. He got turned, and then the Van Helsings killed him. So now she's got an extra grudge against them. And she's like, oh, I'm going to go back there. I'm going to slaughter every last one of them. And he's like, no, that's not the time. They didn't kill your dad. I know it because I saw it. The one who killed your dad was John Constantine. So let's go. And John is leading the group saying okay, we got to get there. it's a pocket dimension of Van Helsing Castle where they currently are. We got to get to them. And everyone's just asking, how do we get to a pocket dimension? And John reveals the House of Mystery, which is able to travel wherever he wills it to. But as he walks up to the doors, turns out they're locked. And all of a sudden they open from the inside, and Andrew's there. And it turns out this is how they're moving the brick, is via the House of Mystery. So Andrew's taking possession of the house, and now it's going to be an all-out battle between him and Constantine. I like it. I think it's good. I think it's a solid issue, continuing the story. It gave Tig some realizations. We had Kane's backstory, and everyone was just bored by it. So it has the humorous bits in there as well. I can't fault this series for pretty much anything at all. The only thing I'll say is that this issue did feel a little bit light in terms of progression. So I am just going to give it I'll give it an 8. I would be an 8.5, but there were 3 artists on this book, and it was very obvious. One of them was in the flashbacks for Kane, so it stayed separate, but the transition between the other 2 artists was really noticeable, and it did kind of take me out for a second. So overall, did enjoy it. Really do like this book. I don't have to keep telling you that, though. Justice League Dark number 16, written by Jeff Lemire and Ray Fox, art by Mikel Janin. So last issue we left off with the group getting all weirded with their magic. Deadman came back to life and was immediately shot in the head. So this issue opens up with everyone like, oh my god, you killed Deadman, you bastards. And then we get Deadman's perspective where he's like, okay, hold on, wait a minute, let me get this straight. I just came back to life and I was killed again. Now I'm just pissed off. That sucks. Anyway, this world's afterlife feels a little bit different, but I can gather the gist of it is I want to go towards that bright light in the sky. So he flies his way up there, and it turns out there's some monster named the Infernal Core, and he's like, oh, none may pass. I am the toll taker of the damned. You must fight me in order to get by. And so Deadman's like, whatever, man. Throw some punches. He throws some back, and he's like, I do not have time for this. And so he just grabs the guy and pushes him through the light. And he's like, there, now we're both back to life. And Toll Taker's like, I'm not supposed to be in this dimension. This is weird for me. Meanwhile, the giant soldier guy in the armor, he's like, oh, hey, you're magic. This is a land of science and logic. You have no place here. And he just extinguishes and explodes the guy. And he's like, all right, cool. Who's next? So then we cut to the underground where Zatanna and Tim Hunter are. And they keep on calling him Your Majesty and how this place is his birthright. And then we get the whole exposition bit of this world was a world of magic. It had all the different magical things in it. Elves, dwarves, fairies, you name it, they were here. But it also had humans. And everyone thought that the humans were just, another one of them. You could just be peaceful with them. They didn't have any innate abilities, but they were there. But it turns out the humans didn't like having no innate abilities, so they created science. And with their science, they made warfare and guns and stuff. And so they thought, all right, look, we as magic people just need to lead the humans, go full no contact, and they will leave us alone. But they underestimated how much the humans hated them, so they went full extinct mode and just tried to get rid of all of the magical creatures, from millions down to hundreds. Until one day, the greatest mage of our time showed up, their king, and the wizard's name was the Hunter, who was an ancestor of Timothy Hunter. And that's why he has the bloodline. He's going to save the day. So cut back to the wild area where the battle's going on. Frankenstein is attacking big soldier dude. I wish I had a better name for him. And the scanned Frankenstein is like, this guy doesn't have any magic in him. He has like a weird form of science. Go ahead and capture him. We need to scan him some more. And it's like, right. So he fires a net at Frankenstein. Meanwhile, hulked out Black Orchid shows up and starts charging after him. And he's like, that guy's definitely magic, but, a lot of strength potential. We need to study it some more as well. Also neutralize Black Orchid. So meanwhile, Deadman, Constantine, and Xanadu are all just standing around. Constantine, of course, is unable to lie anymore, and so he's like, oh man, I feel terrible that we're doing all this to you, Deadman. Deadman's like, you don't have to be sarcastic, dude. He's like, I'm not. I can't do my thing I usually do. Xanadu's also supposed to be immortal, but that's not happening anymore. How much time you got left? She's like, I don't know. I feel like I'm 80, which means I gained about 50 years in about 10 seconds. She's like, right. So we really need to pick this up just so we can save your life. So at that point, Deadman goes and tries to possess the guy in order to knock him out. And the guy's like, ah, yes, a ghost. We have our own thing for ghosts. And he keeps him in basically what is the proton pack. Like it does the same thing and just stores him away. And then Constantine's like, hey man, you seem pretty stupid. And if I was having my normal abilities, I'd be able to talk circles around you, but I can't. So maybe we just stop hurting us. And he's like, no, you guys are magical and I'm going to take you in. So please stop fighting. He's like, well, I'm actually just distracting you so that Black Orchid can attack you from the back. And he's like, what? Oh, pff, just knocks away Black Orchid. I don't think it even captures her. So at that point, Xanadu chimes in just like, hey, okay, stop. We surrender. We'll tell you whatever we know. Just hurry up because I literally do not have much life left in me. And so like, all right, cool, whatever. So then we go back to the underground and they explain a bit more to Timothy. Like, wait a minute, hold on. I don't come from this world. I come from the other world. How could I possibly be a descendant of that man? And it turns out that in the final days, all the wizards and mages came together and they're like, hey, we need to bail on this planet. We found another dimension. It's called Earth. We're just going to like lay low there, build up our armies, and then we'll come back and take back our planet. I found these technological marvels known as the books, and they're going to teleport us over there. I've locked them so only my bloodline can use them, so no one else can follow us. Get it? These are the books of magic. And they're like, we can't use science. And he's like, tough. We literally have no other option. So they start activating it, but then all of a sudden, there's an attack, a bunch of them are killed, and only the hunter manages to make it through. And the reason they know all of this is because they had a oracle on their side who's able to see through the dimensional barrier. So it's like, yep, and now you're back, and you're going to save us all. And they start chanting, the hunter walks the woods. So we follow the soldier dude as he's bringing everyone back to home base of Epoch, I guess it's called. And, his name is Vicar. There it is, Vicar. So at that point, Constantine, because he's unable to lie, he's like, Xanadu, I don't say it's enough, but I always kind of liked you. And she's like, Constantine, just shut up. Okay, cool. Got it? Great. And Frankenstein's like, don't worry, guys. We'll find a way out of this. So they all get unloaded and they are told to, start walking. But all of a sudden an earthquake happens. And they're like, what's going on? Is this one of you guys? And it's like, no, it's not one of us. Meanwhile, in the underground, the earthquake is happening. And it's just like, yes, the world is fighting back against the people on top. And Xanadu's like, are you kidding me? No, something's wrong, man. Something's very wrong. And then we see, even back in the real world, Dr. Johnny Peril is like, there's an earthquake happening on our mountain right now. It's also seemingly happening all over the world, and it's coming through the portal. I can't close the portal or else I'll be trapped over there. So we might have just doomed 2 worlds. And we see across all 3 of our different storylines we're following, a giant magical storm has opened in the sky, and earthquakes are happening underground. So not good things. I liked it. I think it was a fine enough thing. I know they had to do something to John Constantine, who innately does not have a lot of powers himself, so they had to make him tell the truth all the time, but I don't know. It just felt kind of weak the whole way through. I don't know what I would have preferred, but this just didn't feel like quite the right answer. So it's fine. It's not great. It's there. Art-wise, I enjoy it. Mikkel Janen's always a treat. And I like the backstory of the mages and, this is why Timothy Hunter is this important thing. I enjoy that. I hope they can pull it off. I really want to see that work as like this cool final battle sort of thing of Timothy Hunter embracing magic again. I like all that. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'm just going to give it a 7 because it just feels kind of like a middle issue, but I'm looking forward to seeing when we really get the stakes building up. And I know right now we're facing down a multi-world apocalypse, but I just don't see the actual effects of that yet, So 7 for this, looking forward to the next. And that's it. That's all the comics came out from DC Comics this January 30th, 2013. And while I may be in a little bit of a rush, I'll never be in too much of a rush to tell you what comics are coming out next week, mainly because I need a reason for you to come back. Please, I get very lonely. So, next week, we have the number 17 issues of Batwing Detective Comics, Green Arrow, Stormwatch, Animal Man, and Swamp Thing. We have the number 9 issues of Earth 2, World's Finest, and Dial H. We have the number 5 issue of Phantom Stranger, the number 3 issue of Human Bomb, and we have the number 1 issue of the only holiday-themed one-shot New 52 ever put out, the Young Romance New 52 Valentine's Day Special. I have had this in single-issue format for God knows how many years now, and I've never once read it. So we'll see what that ends up like. But anyway, also worth noting out of next week's books is Green Arrow is the start of the Lemire Sorrentino run, which is mwah, after the entire thing of Ann Nocenti, making it not the best. So definitely look forward to that. Definitely check that out. But yeah, that'll pretty much do it. If you have any comments on this show or any show I ever do, go ahead and hit me up on Twitter, Discord, or Patreon. All the links to that are either on screen or in the description. And yeah, that'll do it for me. Thank you very much for watching and checking out this podcast, however it is you do. Be sure to leave some stars or some thumbs up or however it is you show your appreciation for me denigrating myself like this. And as always, try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.